The sun blazed mercilessly over the endless sea of sand, casting long, wavering shadows as the alien cadet's ship hurtled toward the ground. The impact was jarring, metal screeching against stone as the craft skidded to a halt amidst a cloud of dust. Lyra was the first to unstrap herself, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the barren landscape outside. The temperature inside the ship was already climbing, the environmental controls struggling against the oppressive desert heat. "Prepare for disembarkation," she ordered, her voice steady but tinged with an edge of irritation. This was supposed to be a routine survival exercise, but something felt off. Zara, the tallest and most physically imposing of the group, grinned as she stretched her muscular arms. "This place is a joke. They really expect us to struggle here?" she scoffed, her confidence as solid as the rock formations in the distance. Elara, ever the strategist, remained silent, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. The stark, undulating dunes seemed to stretch on forever, offering no sign of life, no water, no shelter, nothing but endless sand and sky. She adjusted her wrist device, which was supposed to display the environmental data. The screen flickered, then died, leaving her staring at a blank interface. "Our tech is failing," she remarked, her tone flat but with an undercurrent of concern. Lyra stepped out first, her boots sinking slightly into the sand. The heat hit her like a wall, nearly taking her breath away. Her wrist device, designed to regulate her body temperature, was unresponsive. She tapped it twice, frowning as it remained dark. "Everyone stay alert," she said, masking her unease with authority. "This environment is more hostile than we anticipated." Zara followed, her bravado unshaken as she cracked her knuckles. "We're elite warriors, not delicate flowers. We can handle a little heat," she declared, though even she wiped a bead of sweat from her brow. Elara brought up the rear, her eyes never stopping their search. "We should locate water first," she advised, her voice calm but insistent. "Our supplies won't last long in this heat." The group moved forward, their initial confidence waning with each step. The desert seemed to play tricks on them, mirages shimmering in the distance, the promise of water always just out of reach. The sun climbed higher, the heat becoming unbearable. Lyra could feel her strength sapping with every passing minute, the relentless sun draining her energy. "Lyra, this isn't right," Zara finally admitted, her voice strained. She looked back at their ship, now a distant speck on the horizon. "We should head back." Lyra hesitated, her pride warring with her instincts. Turning back so soon felt like a defeat, but the reality of their situation was undeniable. Before she could respond, Elara knelt beside a faint track in the sand. "Someone's been here," she murmured, brushing the sand away to reveal the unmistakable imprint of a human boot. All three cadets froze, the realization sinking in. They were not alone in this desert. And whoever was out there had the knowledge to survive where their advanced technology was failing. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, the first real stirrings of fear mingling with a reluctant respect. Earth was not as primitive as they had thought. "We need to find them," she said, her voice steadying as the plan formed in her mind. "They might be our only chance." The cadets, now unified in purpose, began their search, the weight of their earlier arrogance heavy on their shoulders. The desert no longer seemed so empty, its silence now filled with the possibility of the unknown. The sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows over the dunes as the cadets trudged forward, their exhaustion palpable. The desert air, once blistering hot, now turned frigid, a bitter cold seeping into their bones. Lyra's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of movement. The human tracks they'd found earlier had faded into the shifting sands, leaving them with only the growing sense that they were being watched. A sudden noise broke the silence, a low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate from the earth itself. Lyra instinctively reached for her sidearm, her fingers brushing the hilt before realizing it was useless. Their energy weapons had failed hours ago, and now they were left with nothing but their wits and physical prowess. "Stay close," she whispered, the words barely audible as she signaled for the others to form a defensive circle. Zara, her face set in a scowl, muttered under her breath, "I've had enough of this cursed planet." Her bravado was gone, replaced by a simmering anger that made her fists clench involuntarily. Elara, always the calm one, was now visibly tense, her sharp gaze darting between the shadows. Without warning, a blur of movement caught Lyra's eye, a shape darting between the rocks, low to the ground and impossibly fast. She felt her heart skip a beat, adrenaline flooding her veins. "There!" she hissed, pointing in the direction of the movement. But just as quickly as it appeared, the shape vanished, leaving them in a tense silence once more. Zara growled in frustration, her hand flexing as if itching for a fight. "Whatever it is, it's toying with us." Elara's voice cut through the tension, calm but firm. "We're not equipped to fight. Our best chance is to find the humans. They know this terrain, we don't." Lyra nodded, forcing herself to focus. "We keep moving," she ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. The group pressed on, each step heavier than the last, their energy sapped not only by the desert but by the creeping sense of dread that clung to them like a shadow. As night fell, the temperature plummeted further, and the wind began to howl, carrying with it the stinging bite of sand. The cadets wrapped their thin cloaks tighter around themselves, their breath visible in the cold air. The landscape around them seemed to shift, the dunes taking on strange, ominous shapes in the darkness. Lyra's mind raced with thoughts of what could be lurking just out of sight. Then, through the darkness, a flicker of light, a small, distant glow, barely visible against the blackness of the desert night. "Look!" Elara's voice was laced with both relief and urgency. "That must be them." Zara's fatigue evaporated, replaced by a surge of hope. Finally, something real. She started toward the light, her pace quickening with each step. Lyra, however, remained cautious. "We don't know who or what that is," she warned, though she followed Zara's lead. "Stay alert." As they neared the source of the light, the shapes of human figures became clear. 3 people huddled around a small fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. The humans looked up as the cadets approached, their expressions a mix of curiosity and wariness. Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "We're in need of assistance," she said, hoping her words would be enough to bridge the gap between them. One of the humans, an older man with a weathered face, met her gaze with calm, steady eyes. He nodded slowly, gesturing for them to join the warmth of the fire. "You look like you've been through hell," he said in a rough, but not unkind voice. "Welcome to the desert." The cadets hesitated for a moment, then moved closer to the fire, the warmth a welcome reprieve from the cold. As they sat down, the reality of their situation settled in. They were no longer the superior beings they thought themselves to be. Here, in this vast, unforgiving desert, they were simply survivors, no different from the humans who had made this place their home. The fire crackled softly, casting shifting shadows across the sand as the cadets huddled close to its warmth. Lyra's thoughts were racing, but she forced herself to focus on the task at hand. Across from her, the older human survivalist, Jack, carefully unwrapped a bundle of dried meat, offering it to them. "You've been out here long?" he asked, his voice gruff yet not unkind. Lyra hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal, but Zara spoke up, her tone sharp with frustration. "Long enough to know we're not prepared for this hellhole." She tore into the food, her anger momentarily masked by hunger. Elara, sitting quietly beside them, watched the humans with keen interest. "How have you managed to survive out here?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with curiosity. Her eyes flickered to the simple tools they carried, primitive, yet effective. Jack gave a small, knowing smile. "This desert has its own rhythm. Once you learn to move with it, you can survive anything." He looked at the cadets, seeing through their outward bravado. "But you've learned that the hard way, haven't you?" Before Lyra could respond, a sudden, distant howl split the night, freezing them all in place. The sound was otherworldly, echoing off the dunes and sending a shiver down Lyra's spine. The firelight flickered as the wind picked up, swirling sand into the air. Jack's expression darkened, and he stood, motioning for the cadets to follow. "We need to move. Now." His tone left no room for argument. "What was that?" Zara asked, rising to her feet, her muscles tensing for a fight. Lyra could see the instinct to confront the threat warring with the fatigue in Zara's eyes. Desert wraiths, Jack replied curtly as he began to douse the fire. They hunt in packs, and they're drawn to sound. If we stay here, we'll be surrounded. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She glanced at Alara, who was already gathering their few belongings, her movements quick and efficient. We can't outrun them, Lyra said, her voice low but firm. We need a plan. Jack's gaze met hers, appraising. There's an old cave system a mile north. If we can reach it, we might stand a chance. Without another word, the group set off into the night, the wind biting at their exposed skin. The howl came again, closer this time, sending a jolt of fear through Lyra. Her training had prepared her for many things, but this primal terror was new, raw, and overwhelming. As they ran, Lyra's thoughts raced. The desert wraiths were unlike anything they'd encountered before, creatures of legend on their planet, now very real and closing in. She could feel the tension mounting, the fear gnawing at her resolve. Jack led the way, his knowledge of the terrain apparent in the way he navigated the shifting sands. The cadets followed, their earlier arrogance replaced by grim determination. Lyra's breath came in short, sharp bursts, the cold air burning her lungs as they pushed forward. The howls grew louder, and she could almost feel the creatures at their backs, the chase narrowing to its inevitable conclusion. There! Jack pointed ahead, where the shadow of a rocky outcrop loomed in the darkness. The cave is just beyond that ridge. The group surged forward, adrenaline propelling them as the wind howled around them, carrying the cries of the wraiths. Lyra's legs burned, her strength waning, but she pushed herself harder, knowing that slowing down meant certain death. They reached the outcrop, scrambling up the jagged rocks, the cave entrance barely visible in the shadows. Jack ushered them inside, the space narrow and cold, but it offered safety. Lyra collapsed against the rough wall, gasping for breath, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. As the last of the group squeezed into the cave, Jack moved to the entrance, listening intently. The howls echoed in the distance, but they were growing fainter, the wraiths losing their scent. Lyra closed her eyes, her body heavy with fatigue. They had survived, but the reality of their situation was sinking in. They were far from safe. Rest while you can, Jack advised, his voice a soft rumble in the darkness. We're not out of the woods yet. Lyra nodded weakly, the gravity of their situation settling over her like a weight. They were still trapped in the desert, with no way home and danger lurking at every turn. But now, they had a guide, and perhaps a fighting chance. The cavern walls trembled, dust sifting down from the ceiling as the howls outside intensified, the wraiths circling their sanctuary. Lyra's pulse quickened, her eyes darting to the narrow entrance where Jack stood, his silhouette outlined against the dim light filtering through. The air was thick with tension, every breath a struggle as they waited, listening to the approaching storm of predators. Jack turned to the group, his expression grim. They're not going away. They've got our scent, and they won't stop until they've had their fill. His voice was low, steady, but the implication was clear. This was a fight they couldn't win by running. Zara's fists clenched at her sides, her frustration boiling over. We can't just sit here and wait to be picked off, she hissed, the fire in her eyes burning brighter than the fear she tried to conceal. She had always thrived in combat, but this was different. This was survival, and the odds were stacked against them. Alara, usually calm and composed, was now visibly shaken, her mind racing for a solution. We need a distraction, she said, her voice trembling slightly as she forced herself to think logically. Something to draw them away, even if it's just for a few minutes. Lyra's gaze swept the cave, her mind working frantically to piece together a plan. The environment had turned their advanced technology into useless metal, but perhaps there was a way to use the desert's natural dangers to their advantage. Her eyes settled on a small cluster of rocks near the entrance, and an idea began to form. Jack, Lyra said, her voice cutting through the rising panic. Is there a way to trigger a rock slide? Something that could block the entrance, at least temporarily? Jack's eyes narrowed as he considered the possibility. It's risky, he admitted, glancing at the unstable rocks above. But if we time it right, we might be able to trap some of them outside while we deal with the rest. Zara's tension eased, replaced by a grim determination. I'll do it, she volunteered, already moving toward the rocks. Her strength had always been her greatest asset, and now it was their best chance at survival. Lyra's heart pounded as she watched Zara position herself, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. On my signal, Lyra instructed, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Jack, Elara, be ready to fight off anything that gets through. The howls grew louder, the race drawing closer, their shadows flickering against the walls. Lyra could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the responsibility of leadership more tangible than ever. This was their last stand, and there was no room for error. Now! Lyra shouted, and Zara slammed her fist into the rocks with all her might. The cavern shook, a deafening roar filling the air as the rocks above began to shift and tumble, cascading down in a cloud of dust and debris. The entrance was partially blocked, the wraiths outside screeching in fury as they were cut off from their prey. But the victory was short-lived. Several of the creatures had already slipped through, their eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. Jack and Elara moved in unison, weapons drawn, engaging the wraiths with a ferocity born of desperation. The confined space amplified every sound, the clash of metal, the guttural snarls, the labored breaths of the combatants. Lyra joined the fray, her movements precise, every strike calculated. The wraiths were relentless, their sinewy bodies darting in and out of the shadows, but the cadets fought with a newfound unity, their survival instincts honed by the trials of the desert. The battle was brief but intense, the wraiths eventually retreating as the blocked entrance began to collapse entirely. Silence fell, broken only by the heavy breathing of the survivors. The cave was secure, at least for now. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow, his voice steady as he spoke. You fought well. The desert's taught you more than you realize. Lyra nodded, exhaustion pulling at her, but a sense of accomplishment flickered within her. They had faced the worst the desert had to offer and emerged stronger. The cadets had learned that survival was not just about strength or technology. It was about adaptability, resilience, and the will to keep fighting, no matter the odds. As they settled in for what little rest they could manage, Lyra's mind wandered back to their home planet. They had come here to prove their superiority, but Earth had proven its own strength in return. In this vast, unforgiving world, they had found something more valuable than victory. They had found respect, both for the planet and for themselves.